All right, so for this deep dive, you brought excerpts from Joyce Meyer's book, Do It Afraid.
Yeah.
And this book's all about, facing our fears and stepping into what God has planned for us. And I gotta say, the title itself is pretty bold, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about erasing fear completely, but more like, taking action even when you feel it.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
It's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It acknowledges that fear is just naturally a part of who we are,
Right.
as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And Meyer starts by kind of breaking down the different types of fear.
Okay.
And there's one that she calls reverential fear of God.
Okay. Reverential fear. That sounds kind of intimidating. What
Yeah.
exactly does that mean?
Well, think of it like this. It's not about being scared of God,
Right.
but having this deep respect and awe for him.
Okay.
Like the respect you'd have for, say, a judge in a courtroom.
Uh-huh.
You respect their authority, their knowledge.
Right.
That respect leads to a sense of trust in their judgment. And Meyer's suggesting it's the same with God. Reverence leads to obedience,
Yeah.
which then builds our confidence in him.
That's a really interesting perspective. I've always kind of struggled with the idea of fearing God, but framing it as deep respect makes it much more understandable.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced this kind of reverential fear?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think anytime we're truly humbled by something bigger than ourselves,
Right.
whether it's the vastness of the universe or the complexity of the human spirit, I think we're tapping into that sense of reverence. And Meyer even links this reverence to better relationships in our lives.
And that's interesting.
Yeah.
How does she make that connection?
Well, she uses her own life as an example, talking about how her relationships actually improved as her relationship with God deepened.
Wow.
Yeah, it makes you think about, your relationship with God and how that might be impacting your interactions with others.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Could a deeper connection with him bring more peace and strength to those relationships?
That's a great question to ponder.
Yeah.
So if that's the right kind of fear, what are the wrong kinds, according to Meyer?
Well, she's very clear that fearing other people, or even the devil, is not something we should be doing.
Okay.
And she really dives into this trap of people-pleasing versus God-pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
When we're constantly trying to please everyone else, we lose sight of our own internal compass.
Right.
And I think this is particularly relevant for people who are always striving for knowledge and self-improvement, trying to avoid mistakes at all costs.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's that fear of not being good enough, of not measuring up to other people's expectations.
Exactly.
It can be so paralyzing.
It is.
But Meyer's point is that it's more important to align ourselves with God's plan for our lives, even if it's not the popular choice.
Right.
Right.
And here's the thing. She acknowledges that we will feel fear.
Right.
It's a natural human emotion.
Mm-hmm.
She even digs into the Greek word for fear, phobos.
Okay.
It's closely tied to the idea of flight, of running away.
So it's like our instinct is to avoid anything that feels scary or dangerous.
Right.
But is Meyer saying that giving in to that instinct,
Yeah.
letting fear control us, that's what she considers cowardice?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not the feeling itself, but the surrender to it that weakens us.
I see.
We often mistake feeling fear for being weak
Right.
when the real test of strength is choosing to act despite the fear.
So how does Meyer suggest we overcome that instinct to run? Does she have any practical advice?
Well, she uses some powerful examples from the Bible.
Okay.
Think about figures like Joshua, Jeremiah,
Yeah.
Moses.
Mm-hmm.
They were all tasked with these incredible, daunting things.
Right.
And they all faced immense fear.
Right. And what's interesting is that God doesn't dismiss their fear.
Right.
He acknowledges it.
Yeah.
But the focus is on trusting him and moving forward anyway.
Exactly.
So it's not about becoming fearless, but about choosing faith over fear, action over paralysis. That's a really powerful distinction.
It is.
But how do we actually do that? Right.
How do we make that choice when we're feeling overwhelmed by fear?
Well, Meyer offers a lot of practical advice.
Okay.
But one of the most compelling examples she uses is from her own life, her very first speaking engagement in Jacksonville.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't that the one where she was so terrified she lost her voice?
Yeah.
Talk about relatable. I mean, it would have been so easy to just back out.
Right.
But she persevered.
She did. She pushed through that crippling fear.
Wow.
And the event turned out to be a huge success. People loved it.
Wow.
And it actually launched her speaking career.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So the fear didn't magically disappear,
No.
but God worked through her fear to accomplish something amazing.
Right.
It really highlights the power of choosing faith over fear.
Absolutely.
So this leads Meyer to ask a very important question.
Right.
What are we really afraid of?
Yeah.
What's lurking beneath the surface fears?
Well, she believes it often boils down to the fear of emotional pain.
Okay.
We build up all these walls to protect ourselves from getting hurt. Right.
From feeling rejected or inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
It's a natural human instinct, but...
But those walls end up becoming prisons, right?
Right.
They keep us trapped in a cycle of fear and avoidance. So how do we break free?
Yeah.
What does Meyer suggest we do?
Well, this is where she introduces this really interesting idea of doors of pain.
Okay.
Every time we experience emotional pain, it's like we erect this metaphorical door
Mm-hmm.
to block it off,
Yeah.
to protect ourselves.
Okay. I'm starting to see where this is going. We
Yeah.
can't just keep building doors forever, can we?
Right.
At some point, we have to face what's behind them.
Exactly.
So instead of slamming the door shut and hiding, we open it up, walk through it,
Right.
and reclaim our power.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we do that practically?
Yeah.
It still sounds pretty scary.
Well, Meyer uses this surprisingly relatable example to illustrate this concept.
Okay.
Her fear of asking for water at McDonald's.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Her fear of asking for water.
It's a great example because it's something so mundane, so everyday.
I have to hear this story.
But it perfectly captures the absurdity of letting fear control us in even the smallest things.
Right.
She talks about this internal battle she has,
Mm-hmm.
wanting the water but being afraid of what people might think.
Oh, gosh.
She even almost retreats to the bathroom to avoid the whole situation.
Oh, no. Did she actually ask for the water?
She did.
Okay.
She catches herself, turns around, marches up to the counter,
Good for her.
asks for water
Ugh.
with lots of ice, she says.
Uh-huh.
And guess what?
What?
Nothing bad happens.
Oh, of course.
No one laughs.
Yeah.
No one judges her.
Right.
She walks out of McDonald's feeling like a champion.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's such a simple act, but it represents such a powerful victory over fear.
Yeah.
It makes me think about all the times I've let fear stop me from doing something I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Something that really wasn't that scary in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. It's like a muscle we have to exercise.
Right.
The more we face our fears, the stronger we become.
Mm.
And the less power they have over our lives.
What?
It's not about becoming fearless,
Right.
but about recognizing that courage isn't the absence of fear.
Right.
It's action in the face of fear.
So if we apply that to the bigger challenges in our lives,
Yeah.
it means we can choose to act even when we feel afraid.
Mm.
And that action itself can diminish the fear's power over us.
Yeah.
That's really encouraging.
It is.
Now, I'm curious to hear more about Meyer's call to action.
Yeah.
What specific steps does she recommend for putting this do-it-afraid mentality into practice?
Well, that's a great segue into the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Let's take a closer look at how Meyer encourages us to not just understand fear,
Right.
but actually overcome it
Mm-hmm.
and step into the fullness of what God has planned for us.
Sounds good to me. So we were talking about how facing our fears, even in small ways, can help us build courage. But I'm wondering, what about those bigger fears?
Right.
The ones that feel truly paralyzing? How does Meyer suggest we tackle those?
Well, one of her main points is don't wait for the fear to disappear.
Okay.
Decide beforehand that you'll act despite it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like making a mental contract with yourself,
Yeah.
a commitment to move forward, even when fear tries to hold you back.
I like that it's taking control of the situation rather than letting fear control you.
Exactly.
And she ties this back to those biblical examples, right?
Mm-hmm.
God didn't promise those leaders a fear-free journey, did he?
Not at all. Think about it. He promised his presence,
Right.
his strength,
Right.
his guidance.
Yeah.
The focus wasn't on eliminating the feeling of fear,
Right.
but on empowering them to act despite it.
Right.
They had to trust that God would be with them every step of the way.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not about the absence of fear, but about having the faith to move forward even when we feel afraid.
Mm.
And there's that powerful quote from Meyer that really captures this spirit of defiance, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
Something about the devil forgetting his plans.
Yes, she says, "Devil, you can forget the plans you had for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what God told me to do."
Wow.
There's such a strong sense of determination in those words, don't you think?
It's almost like she's declaring war on fear,
Yeah,
not letting it dictate her choices or her actions anymore.
right.
But how does this translate to our everyday lives?
Mm.
How can we practically apply this warrior against fear mentality?
Well, Meyer talks about the importance of verbalizing our faith, of actually speaking our intentions out loud.
Okay.
It's like taking that internal decision and making it a public declaration.
So instead of just thinking, okay, I'm going to do this even though I'm scared,
Right.
you actually say it out loud.
Exactly. And
Wow.
you can even address the fear directly.
Mm-hmm.
For example, imagine you feel called to share your faith with someone,
Okay.
but you're terrified of rejection.
Right.
You could say something like, Lord, I know I feel afraid,
Right.
but I trust you.
Okay.
I'm going to step out in faith and share what you've put on my heart.
Saying it out loud almost makes it more real, more concrete. Like you're drawing a line in the sand and saying, fear, you can't control me anymore.
Yeah.
I can see how that would be empowering.
Yeah.
Does she give any other examples of how to use this verbalization technique?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Imagine you feel led to give a generous offering, but you're worried about your finances.
Right.
It can be scary to step out in that kind of faith.
Uh-huh.
But Meyer would encourage you to say something like, Devil,
Yeah.
I know you're trying to make me doubt, but I'm choosing to trust God's provision. I'm going to honor his call in my life.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is.
It's like you're taking back control from fear and placing it in God's hands.
Right.
But I have to admit, sometimes it feels like fear is just so ingrained in our minds, so deeply rooted in our experiences.
Yeah.
Can we really just speak it away?
Well, it's not always easy.
Right.
Meyer acknowledges that fear is a powerful force,
Right.
but she reminds us that it doesn't have the final say. We have the power to choose our response.
Mm-hmm.
And when we choose faith over fear, we open ourselves up to a whole new realm of possibilities.
That's a really encouraging thought.
It is.
It's not about becoming some kind of superhuman who never feels fear,
Right.
but about recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm curious to hear more about how Meyer uses biblical analogies to illustrate this concept.
Okay.
You mentioned the roaring lion earlier, right?
Yes. She references 1 Peter 5.8, where it says,
Okay.
Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour.
Okay, that sounds pretty terrifying.
It does.
But Meyer doesn't want us to cower in fear, does she?
No, not at all. She actually emphasizes the word seeking in that passage.
Mm-hmm.
It means the devil's looking for an opportunity,
Right.
but it's not a guarantee that he'll succeed.
Okay.
Think about a time when you felt threatened by fear,
Mm-hmm.
like a lion roaring in your face.
Yeah.
How did you react?
Right.
Did you let it paralyze you?
Mm-hmm.
Or did you find the strength to stand your ground?
That's a great question. I think about times when I've had to give presentations or speak up in meetings.
Right.
My heart would be pounding my palms, sweating,
Yeah.
but I knew I had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And often the act of pushing through that fear was what helped me overcome it.
Exactly. It's
Right.
like the lion might roar,
Right.
but it can't actually devour us unless we allow it.
Right.
And Meyer's point is that we have the power to resist the power to overcome because of our faith in God.
Right.
It's not about our own strength,
Right.
but about tapping into a power that's greater than ourselves.
That's so encouraging.
It is.
It's like she's saying, look, the devil might try to scare you, but he's ultimately powerless against God.
Mm-hmm.
So stand firm, declare your trust in God, and watch that lion back down.
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
It is.
And it reminds us that we don't have to fight this battle alone.
Right.
We have God's strength to rely on.
So it's not just about passively believing,
Right.
but about actively resisting fear and aligning ourselves with God's will, even when it feels scary. But, I think for a lot of people, the fear of failure, of
Yeah.
making mistakes, can be a huge obstacle. How does Meyer address this?
That's a great question, and it perfectly segues into the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
It's about understanding how this fear of failure can hold us back
Right.
and how to embrace a more empowering mindset.
Okay.
Are you ready to explore that?
Absolutely. I think this is something a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
So I'm eager to hear what Meyer has to say about it. We're back. And before the break, we were talking about this powerful image of the roaring lion and how we can stand firm in our faith.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of us, the fear of failure
Mm-hmm.
is a major roadblock.
Yeah.
What insights does Meyer offer on that?
It's fascinating how she frames this.
Okay.
She suggests that fear in itself isn't the enemy.
Okay.
It's our reaction to it
Right.
that determines whether it holds us back
Mm-hmm.
or propels us forward.
So it's like fear is a tool. It can be used for good or for bad, depending on how we wield it.
Yeah. And for those who identify with the learner archetype,
Mm-hmm.
that desire for knowledge and growth
Right.
can sometimes be intertwined with a fear of messing up.
Right.
Meyer encourages us to reframe that fear
Okay.
To see it not as a sign of weakness,
Okay.
but as a natural part of the learning process.
So instead of avoiding challenges out of fear of failure,
Mm-hmm.
we should embrace them as opportunities to grow and learn.
That's the idea. Think about it.
Okay.
Have you ever learned anything worthwhile
Mm-hmm.
without making a few mistakes along the way?
You've got a point there.
Right.
Some of my biggest lessons have come from those oops moments. It's like you learn more from the stumbles than from the smooth sailing.
Meyer would agree with you on that.
Okay.
She emphasizes that God's grace is always there to catch us when we fall.
Right.
It's not about being perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but about being willing to step out in faith,
Right.
even if it means risking a few stumbles along the way.
Yeah. This whole conversation reminds me of that core message. Do it afraid.
Right.
Don't let fear make the decisions for you.
Uh-huh.
Take action even if your knees are shaking and trust that God is with you every step of the way.
It's a message that resonates deeply, isn't it?
It does.
It's a call to move beyond the limitations we set for ourselves
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and step into the fullness of what God has planned for us.
Right.
It's about embracing the unknown and trusting that even if we stumble,
Right.
we'll learn and grow along the way.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It has.
It's really challenged me to rethink my relationship with fear,
Yeah.
to see it not as something to be avoided at all costs,
Mm-hmm.
but as an opportunity to deepen my faith and trust in God.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And I think this message can be incredibly empowering for anyone who's feeling held back by fear.
Right.
It's a reminder that we have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
We can choose to let fear control us.
Right.
Or we can choose to trust God and move forward in faith.
Well said. And as we wrap up,
Okay, I'm going to leave you with this question. What is one thing you feel called to do, but have been putting off out of fear?
yeah.
Could today be the day you take that first step,
Right.
even if it's a shaky one?
Mm-hmm.
Remember, you don't have to be fearless.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be willing to do it afraid.
And who knows that one step could lead to amazing breakthroughs and
Ah.
growth beyond what you ever imagined.